Wittgenstein and Dennett, Applied Philosophical Thinking Models and Changing Our Stuck Pictures. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Technology Philosophy. Today I would like to discuss Ludwig Wittgenstein, the Austrian-British philosopher living 1889 to 1951, working in the areas of logic, the philosophy of mind, and the philosophy of language. He is well known for his master works, Tractatus, published in 1921, that he carried around with him in a backpack during World War I and almost lost, which characterizes his early period, and Philosophical Investigations, published in 1953, which characterizes his later period. Other notable works include On Certainty, published after his death in 1969, and the Brown and Blue Books, lecture notes from 1933 and 1935. As with many philosophers, Wittgenstein's earlier and later work seems to be stridently different. However, Wittgensteinian scholar Hans Sluge at UC Berkeley suggests in his 2011 book entitled simply Wittgenstein that similar themes exist throughout and that his work can be read as a whole. Similarly, the contemporary philosopher James Conant at the University of Chicago in 2007 used the term mono-Wittgensteinianism to represent the idea that the earlier and later Wittgenstein had the same project, namely offering a therapy that will cure us of the illusion of meaning something where we really mean nothing. A conference entitled The Too Early Wittgenstein was held at the University of London Birkbeck on September 9th and 10th, 2013, and wondered about the relevance of Wittgenstein today, featuring a number of mostly analytical philosophy papers. In this video, I am discussing two topics: Wittgenstein's relevance today, mainly in the greater application of philosophical thinking methods, and a comparison of Wittgenstein and Dennett. The first topic is the relevance of Wittgenstein today. One of the most obvious reasons that Wittgenstein might not be relevant is the almost completely exclusive focus of philosophers on exposition. The academic practitioners in the field of philosophy might better be called scholars of philosophy rather than philosophers who are actually charged with the conduct of new thinking. There is value in exposition, but that is in studying the old texts and explaining them, trying to figure out what they mean, but the second step is missing. There is little effort to apply the ways of thinking of philosophers to the problems of our day, especially beyond philosophy, and this is critical. It constitutes the unlocked value of philosophy and is something we try to do proactively in technology philosophy. There is a branch of philosophy called applied philosophy, but it is not applying philosophical thinking models or improving the rigor of our thinking by using philosophical methods, but rather finding support for largely political and ethical agendas in philosophy, for example, using Deleuze to justify environmental practices. Further, perhaps the biggest unrealized value in applying philosophical thinking methods is on the affirmative side, to positively and visionarily create and structure our thinking about making ourselves and our world in the modern era, as opposed to only thinking of applying philosophical thinking models congruent in the sense of the more negative evaluation and destruction of logic and arguments. One way to congruently use Wittgenstein today is by considering our contemporary puzzles and trying to see where we are stuck in our pictures, to use Wittgensteinian-speak, where we are stuck in our thinking models and paradigms, and shift our way of thinking by changing to new pictures and models. One example could be the picture or model by which we have thought of the cell or living things more generally. The old, possibly stuck picture is one of a life cycle: birth, living for some time, and followed by decline and death. The new picture could be one of rejuvenation, perpetual capacity for living giving appropriate maintenance, as demonstrated by keeping cells alive indefinitely in the lab. Another example could be identifying a current problem area in neuroscience, like quantitative psychology's claim of being able to understand all of human behavior. Perhaps this is a stuck picture and could benefit from a reflective rethinking. The key point is to think differently about our methods, propositions, models, or paradigms. Not that the methods or propositions are themselves correct or not. That depends on the specific time, place, and person involved in their use. The idea is not to stop doing science, but to look at what we are doing differently. Now moving to the second topic, Wittgenstein and Dennett. One conference talk that opened up the broader theme of Wittgenstein's relevance today in the overall topic area of the philosophy of mind was given by Catherine Morris from Oxford on the topic of how Wittgensteinian is Dan Dennett. This is in the current context of an intellectual climate where Wittgenstein is irrelevant, both to analytic and continental philosophy and possibly beyond, and Dennett is controversial, but in any case not irrelevant. Dan Dennett is a currently living American philosopher and cognitive scientist working in the area of the philosophy of mind, and known for books such as Consciousness Explained in 1992 and Darwin's Dangerous Idea in 1996. He has a new book out now in 2013, Intuition Pumps and Other Tools for Thinking, which is mainly reflective on his own methodology with no new content. Some of the thinking tools Dennett outlines are intuition pumping, reductio ad absurdum, staging or scaffolding, and conducting sophisticated naive mental anthropology. Dennett's claim is that we need to think reliably and gracefully about hard problems, and we need tools, imagination extenders, a kind of prosthetics, which would do this. Wittgenstein and Dennett are similar in that they are both reflective on what they are doing when they do philosophy, and consider what others might be trying to do when they also are trying to do philosophy. Both would concur that any thinking tools are not fixed approaches appropriate to every situation, that they are tools that would need to be selected specifically for whatever the specific inquiry is at hand. Another similarity between the two philosophers is that they consider the question of what is philosophy and the task of the philosopher. Wittgenstein maintains that there is no philosophical progress, and in the Philosophical Investigations number 109, he says that the task of the philosopher is not to explain anything, but to notice what has not been noticed, leaving everything as it is, and that description should take the place of explanation. Part of the reason there can be no progress in philosophy for Wittgenstein is because in some contexts like philosophy, there are no generalities, only specificities. The right questions and answers of philosophy are relative to specific times, places, and people. However, philosophers may help us to see a new picture, resolving our stuck situation of being cleaved to the grip of a picture, having certain pictures, visions, and ways of looking at things, especially with our modal language, and it could be helpful to change those pictures. Dennett, on the other hand, does not think that it is possible to have progress in philosophy just as in the natural sciences, and that progress comes from making and reflecting upon mistakes, which is possibly analogical to Wittgenstein's untying knot. One indication of progress is that our questions are better, and that there are still important unresolved questions like how meaning exists in a material world, what is consciousness, and does free will exist? Aside from mistake-making and reflecting on mistakes, a second thinking tool Dennett articulates is his version of reductio ad absurdum, that is, reducing things to absurdity, in this case using preposterousness to pry out contradictions. In a funny philosophy of mind example, John Eccles in a talk says, "Forget neural networks, the mind is in glutamate." Dennett responds by asking, "Is it murder to pour glutamate down the drain?" And Eccles answers, "It is hard to tell." The question would be, from this example, who is being more preposterous, which interestingly indicates that preposterousness is subjective, but more generally that preposterousness can be used as a philosophical method. A third thinking tool Dennett exhorts us to is the activity of mental anthropology. There are two kinds of images in the world: the manifest image, how the world seems to us, and the scientific image, which consists of molecules, atoms, quarks, and such. We cannot make a simplistic scientific move of claiming that only the scientific is real. Instead, we should ask if we can spot a manifest image from the scientific image to describe the way the world seems to be full of tastes, shadows, smells, and colors. Philosophers should be anthropologists, maybe initially naive anthropologists, performing a systemization of our interests like beauty and truth, and trying to massage a theory out of the data, or better, as sophisticated naive anthropologists, where the philosopher should negotiate between the new science images of discovery and the manifest images of everyday life. Dennett himself has previously articulated a debt to Wittgenstein, that his book Consciousness Explained is an elaboration of the passage 308 in the Philosophical Investigations, that the nature of mental processes is undecided, a decisive moment in a conjuring trick, where Dennett, inspired by this claim to conjuring, does not want to leave these mental processes unexplained. Overall, Catherine Morris concludes that there are a number of analogies between Wittgenstein and Dennett, but that they don't amount to much and no future direction is obvious. Dennett's thinking tools are not anything new. They are mostly just the usual classical logical fallacies and other methods for finding unsoundness in arguments. However, what is relevant is that we are no longer teaching these methods in universities like Oxford, and this kind of critiquing mindset with a classical toolset would be useful.